Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this IASA Symposium. Andy O'Shea here, delighted to be here to help the Students' Association in promoting the aviation industry as a career of choice amongst many people across many areas of society. I think I've been asked to talk about the importance of choosing the right ATO, and I thought that I would come at that from a couple of points of view. I mean, clearly becoming an airline pilot is a dream for many, many people in many age groups and across all walks of life. And when I was in Ryanair, I encountered so many students from different trades and professions. You can't imagine it. We saw, chippies, carpenters, plumbers, architects, engineers, musicians, but strangely enough, we saw very few lawyers. But the point is that the dream of becoming an airline pilot is very widespread, and it has no respect for age or gender or background or level of education. And this dream can be extremely powerful. It can be prolonged and have a really profound effect on an influence on people. It can end in joy, but it can also end in despair with some long-term financial and personal damage consequences. So, it is a risky vocation in the sense that aviation is a safety critical industry where the price of incompetence can be very, very high. So standards are high, and there are many justifiable entry barriers to overcome for somebody who wants to become an airline pilot. And here I think we encounter a fundamental truth, and that is that not everyone is cut out to be an airline pilot. So we'll bear that in mind, and we'll come back to that concept as we go through this talk. But, fortunately, we're now able to describe what a competent airline pilot looks like, because we now have industry agreed and clearly described pilot competencies. These have been analyzed, researched, published and endorsed by ICAO, the IASA, the FAA, Transport Canada and other major agencies around the world, IATA as well. And these pilot competencies are really important. And we know what these pilot competencies look like when we see them in action, because we now have agreed and clearly described behavioral indicators or observable indicators for each of these competencies. And so armed with these, we're able to agree and describe what attributes an applicant student pilot needs in order for him or her to have a decent chance of qualifying and getting an airline pilot job, which is the purpose of the end goal for everybody in this process. The other thing we have to remember is that normally for people, their biggest investment would be a mortgage, buying a house, and then traditionally after that it would be the car. But if you want to become an airline pilot, the percentages now are so balanced, so biased towards individuals funding their own training that this is will be a huge investment for you and for your mum and dad, the bank of mum and pop, as we call it, a family investment in your training. So choosing where you're going to spend your hard-earned cash is really crucial. And this is particularly so because we know, industry knows, and individuals who've worked their way through industry know that when it comes to that airline assessment, the pass rates can be depressingly low. So here we're talking about qualified pilots with a license, gone through a full regulatory compliant training process in accordance with the IASA regulations. And yet these people are not able to pass an airline assessment. Now there's a number going around that has been quoted in several fora, conferences, training symposiums from the European Cockpit Association. And that is that there are 7,000 licenses lying dormant in Europe, which is a staggering number. And even if half that is true, even if there's 3,500 licenses lying dormant in Europe, each of those represents so much in terms of hope, investment, and sadness and despair when it doesn't work out. But when you think of the numbers, the money involved, if you take it that it costs about 100,000 euros to train a pilot from scratch, 3,500 times 100,000 is 3.5 billion euros in wasted money and all that hope and expectation down the drain. So the surprising facts involved here, I think for some people might be surprising, is that As I said, not all people are cut out to be airline pilots. But the other thing is that not all ATOs are the same. So if we come back to the first one of those, not all out to be airline pilots. We've talked about the pilot competencies, and we now know what the ideal pilot kind of looks like and how they behave thanks to behavioral or observable indicators. We're able to map those competencies and those behaviors back to an individual's aptitude and personality. And we know that the pilot assessments, creditable pilot assessments that are available now, we know that they work. They raise the bar in terms of predictability of whether or not somebody coming into the training process will actually qualify, and more importantly, qualify and get a job. Now, I'm chairman of a thing called the Aircrew Training Policy Group, which is a training advisory group sitting close to IASA. And through them, we proposed to the European Commission about 2 years ago a paper. That paper, we said that we think that pilot assessments should become a mandatory part of the pilot training process. And they took the paper and they read it and they said it was a very good paper. And then they said, well, yes, we think that having pilot assessments prior to training would be, quote, industry best practice. But they also said that they would not make it mandatory. And one of the reasons they said it was because it's a free world, including the freedom to waste your own money, which is quite amazing. Now, I don't think that's acceptable. And so when I left Ryanair, I started a company called the Airline Pilot Club, and it is designed to help people avoid wasting their money. We'll talk about that later on. The fact is that people who are considering an airline pilot career should regard establishing their status in the context of a pilot assessment in the same way that they would check out their medical status against the pilot class 1 medical requirements before they start spending money. And I'd really like if you could keep this in mind during this talk. Second surprising truth, not all ATOs are the same. So an ATO is an approved training organization, a flying school in more simple parlance. And here I would say that all ATOs have to be compliant with the regulations. And here in Europe, we have the IASA regulations as administered and implemented, if you like, by the national aviation authorities. But the fact is that compliance does not equate to performance. Compliance means that a national aviation authority certifies that the ATO has aircraft, simulators, documentation, manuals, instructors, and they all meet the minimum requirements set down in the IASA regulation. But the national aviation authorities have no real opportunity or remit to comment or have an input into the quality of the training and checking that takes place in an ATO. Now, that's not to say that individual inspectors wouldn't have opinions, and they would express those opinions. And if the word got out that an ATO was seriously underperforming, well, then the National Aviation Authority, their competent authority, would step in. But in the normal course of events for a National Aviation Authority and its relationship with an ATO, assessing compliance does not provide many opportunities to judge performance. So for instance, the ATO, when it applies for its initial certification, there's an assessment then. Of course, individual instructors and examiners are assessed through the assessment of competence by the national authority. And the National Aviation Authority will conduct audits, but the audits are against regularity, the quality. So to recap this section, just remember that not everyone is suited to become an airline pilot. An aptitude assessment is becoming as important standard, and not all ATOs are the same. So moving on then, some tips for choosing an ATO. So a few questions and answers here. So the ATO financially sound. So this is a key question. Again, going back to your investment, your second largest investment in your life, your family, you need to ask yourself some questions. And this is not an, but I would certainly be looking at how long has the ATO been operating. You know, APC has a great relationship, a partner relationship with, say, AFTA in Cork. They've been around for 25 years or more. Block of time to be in the business. You'd look at who owns the ATO. You know, are they from a flying training background? What is their motivation in setting up the ATO and managing the ATO? You'd look at their fleet. What's their fleet like? Fleet of aircraft, fleet of simulators. If you have a mix of mature and new equipment, that would suggest a planned growth strategy. If you've got all shiny new equipment, it might suggest a less stable business platform and a newer entry into the market. Do they own their premises, or is it leased? And as I'll come to later on, PSMCC. So these are questions that would be indicative of whether or not the ATO is sound and is prepared to invest where it matters, which is in the general quality. The next question I'd be interested in is, does the ATO itself provide all applicants to a course with a well-regarded pilot assessment? Now, there's a lot in that question. All applicants associated with airlines to any course with a well-regarded pilot assessment. And any responsible ATO should provide all applicants with a good assessment. Now, for instance, Compass, an excellent assessment process, and so is Aon Assessment Solutions, it used to be known as CUTE. These are very good examples of assessment processes that are used across the world, say, and leading airlines in Europe, etc., and in the Far East. But you have to understand that not all assessments are the same. And so an ATO would offer you and ask what assessment they use and do some research on it. And you should be looking for something at the Compass or Aon standard. That will give you a good indication that this ATO is getting quality training and not just interested in separating you from your cash. And if, you have to be careful if an ATO does not provide applicants with an assessment, or worse, it's a kind of homemade assessment that's dressed up to look scientific and it isn't. So this is something that you should look for. The other thing that's really important is to see whether or not the ATO that you're researching, does it have a specific link with an airline? Now, this is the ideal situation, okay? So you've got an ATO, an independent ATO, but it has a formal arrangement with an airline, like, say, the way AFTA has a relationship with Ryanair, Global Aviation in Athens has a relationship with Aegean Airways, and Aerogard in the USA has a relationship with Sky. These are great ATOs to target because the airlines themselves will have conducted a thorough technical and financial due diligence on those ATOs that they would partner with. So a lot of that concern and heavy lifting and worry will be removed from your shoulders by associating yourself with that type of ATO. So the other question then, does the ATO have a good track record of providing students to airlines despite not having a formal relationship with an airline? So this is kind of the second tier of relationship that you'd like to see between the airline employers. So they mightn't have a formal arrangement, but they might have a very good track record providing students to that airline. Bear in mind that when you see that, it's a very good sign because airlines, they're staffed by human beings and airlines can like certain ATOs, despite the range you should certainly look for. But you need to think about the flip side of that. And in as much as an airline can like a certain ATO, and I assure you that that happens, very seriously dislike certain ATOs. So you need to be careful that you research every aspect of the target ATO that one or an airline likes, but you're not getting into one that an airline does not like, and you could become contaminated with that association. So you need to be clever about how you research. The last point I'd make here is about the APS-MCC. We mentioned this earlier, the Airline Pilot Standard, MCC. And I think this is a very good ATO providing quality training to a high standard. It's to see if the ATO has an approval from its National Aviation Authority to conduct APS-MCC training. And I'll tell you, so I said it's the Airline Pilot Standard, MCC, and that was deliberately chosen by our group, the ATPG, to try and separate it and display it as an course. which will provide students who undergo it with a much higher standard of training due to the requirements that were integrated and built into the regulation and the AMC. So for instance, the APS-MCC requires a certain type of simulator to be used. So we try to raise the bar in terms of the equipment that's because the aircraft, fine aircraft, but no longer representative of modern airliners such as the 737 or the Airbus. So we try to drive, we doubled the duration of the simulator training from 20 hours to 40 hours and pro rata if it's part of an integrated course. And this extra time is used to provide so line-oriented flight training, competency-based training. We looked at the technical knowledge requirements. So the APS-MCC is an interview. It's all focused on the airline pilot career. We looked at the qualification of instructors, and the fact is that in the traditional course, for the instructor in the jock element to have any training. So we that SMCC who are going to teach you how to fly a swept wing aircraft. And I guess the APS-MCC is competency based. It goes now during the day of the assessment and onwards through your career training and promotion during your airline career. So that provides an integrated or modular training course and provides an APS-MCC is a good bet. Okay, I would advise you to the course should say, quote, in accordance with AMC 2 to the regulation FCL 735. For an ATO that has specific approval from the National Aviation Authority to train the say well, the time in the simulator, it must be very expensive. And indeed, it is more expensive than the standard MCC. But at this stage of your career, when you have put all the heavy expenditure behind you and you are qualified to the point where you're ready to do your MCC, your APS MCC, the difference between the standard MCC and the APS MCC in terms of cost is tiny, but it could be absolutely crucial to you being successful at that interview. And there is data out there now to prove that people who go through the APS MCC training have a much higher chance of passing the airline assessment. And that data has been quoted in IASA circles and is available. So to summarize and to just reflect briefly on the Airline Pilot Club, we want to help you with these really important decisions. We want to help you make smart decisions at the early part of your career. We'll help you figure out if you're the right person for the airline pilot career. We have an Aon designed and produced what we call an indicative assessment, which will give you a really good insight into your strengths and weaknesses as far as the airline pilot career is concerned. We'll help you figure out what training program suits your personal circumstances. So we'll help you decide on whether a modular route or an integrated, whether you might consider going into the military, or if an MPL is a good course for you. We'll try and help you choose the correct pathway for you. And we only recommend ATOs that we have personal and professional knowledge of. Our partner ATOs meet all the best criteria that I've just spoken about over the last 10 or 12 minutes. And we will guide you, APC will guide you on your pathway to being an airline pilot by giving you the benefit of our experience in one-on-one meetings and in webinars with experts. And we will focus on areas that give you the best preparation for your airline pilot assessment training and career. So that's it. It's a very important decision when you decide who to engage with as an ATO. I hope I've helped you in giving you some pointers and some background. And you can find us in the airlinepilotclub.com if you want to follow up, and we're always happy to help everybody. So thank you very much. Very grateful to IASA for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I'm sure the IASA symposium will be very successful. Thank you.
I help make the world a smaller place, but I'm not a pilot.
I make deals worth millions of dollars, but I'm not a banker.
In the world of aircraft leasing, a soaring business demanding the highest levels of acumen and personal skills, one name stands out. And so do its people.
I work with government officials, but I'm not a politician.
Dubai Aerospace Enterprise is a leading aviation force with more than 30 years' experience in the aircraft leasing industry. Headquartered in Dubai, one of the world's most dynamic cities, DAE has a worldwide network and a global culture uniting its people, its partnerships, and its way of doing business.
I resolve many technical issues, but I'm not an engineer.
We own and manage a diverse fleet of more than 350 aircraft, worth over $14 billion, leased to more than 100 airlines in 50 countries. From startup organizations to leading international carriers, each client is different. Our innovative approach to customized fleet solutions is a hallmark of our success. As the industry grows, so do our opportunities.
I have a special
And to sum up today, we'd like to finish off by announcing the winner of the AlphaTech Simulator Voucher. So well done to Claire Ahern. If you could reach out to us on info@iasa.aero. And with that, that concludes IASA's 5th Annual Aviation Symposium. To all of our speakers and panelists, thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Aviation is an industry driven by passion and enthusiasm, and each participant today showed that. To students out there thinking of choosing a career in aviation, or to anyone who is already dreaming or working in the aviation industry, although the industry is knocked at the moment, we encourage you to follow your dreams and believe in the industry. A final message of thanks to Travel Massive and VideoWorks for partnering and supporting today's event. And to Aer Lingus, KPMG, SMBC Aviation Capital, EY, PwC, the iStaff Foundation, Killick Aerospace and DAE Capital, our signature sponsors. To the IAA, 6 West, CEE Park and Arup are supported by sponsors. To ITT Future U, Airbus, the Airline Pilots Club, Investors and Entrepreneurs, National Flight Centre, Simtech Aviation and AlphaTech are partners. And finally, Dublin City University, UCD Smurfit and Munster Technological University are university partners. A big thank you to all of you for your continued support. Well done to all of our competition winners today. Once again, you can reach us at info@iasa.aero to claim your prizes. Please head over to our social media channels, Irish Aviation Students Association, or visit our website at www.iasa.aero to become a member and tune in for future events. From all of us here at IASA, have a good evening and keep safe.